might be small, also pretty strong. This hobby is not a cheap hobby. Virtual wallet is different because it takes all the thinking out of it.
Mr. McKinley. Yes, sir. There is really no room to get through here, is there? Wow.
important in American history is not from my district, is Rodney Frelinghuysen's ancestors. Are they all from Jersey?
Well, good morning. I'd like to call the Subcommittee on Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection to order, and the chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Good morning and welcome again to the Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection Subcommittee hearing. Today's hearing is a continuation of our Disruptor series in which our subcommittee explores emerging technology and all the ways innovation is reshaping industries. The focus of our hearing this morning is product and package delivery, and I'm excited to learn about the new innovative ways businesses are interacting with consumers and how technology is being leveraged to deliver goods quickly and safely to consumers. The U.S. e-commerce market is projected to reach $500 billion by 2018 and is expected to see substantial growth by 2020. When we think of e-commerce, rarely do we consider its physical footprint, the process of actually fulfilling the online order, and facilitating its delivery. However, my home state of Ohio has become somewhat of an e-commerce hub. Ohio offers favorable geographic location, a workable transportation network, a business-friendly regulatory framework, and skilled laborers. Because of these key items, Ohio is home to roughly 760 warehouse establishments, including many e-commerce fulfillment operations. In today's digital on-demand economy, consumers have come to expect flexibility and quick delivery. In fact, a 2016 survey indicates that same-day delivery is a priority for consumers and that consumers want to have options for where their deliveries go, whether that be to their office or some other personalized pickup point. Technology such as drones and other automated couriers offer innovative approaches to meeting these demands. For example, drones allow fast and efficient delivery because they have the ability to traverse difficult terrain, fly over bodies of water, and avoid the natural traffic congestion that slows traditional delivery. I look forward to hearing more about the use of drones and other automated delivery systems from our witnesses today, and how such technological advancements are being used to meet consumer demands and what the safety issues are. I also look forward to exploring how we as policymakers can promote innovation and address any regulatory barriers. Again, I want to thank our witnesses for being with us today as we have this discussion today. And I have a couple minutes left, and I recognize the Vice Chairman from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling today's hearing, the latest in the subcommittee's Disruptor Series to examine the development and implementation of innovative delivery services for businesses and consumers. One aspect we will focus on is the potential commercial application of product delivery systems via unmanned aerial aircraft systems, also referred to as UAS or drones, and how to ensure the safe integration of these services into the national airspace system. In May of 2015, Mississippi State University, which is in my congressional district, and the Alliance for System Safety of Unmanned Aircraft Systems Through Research Excellence, or ASSURE for short, was selected by the Federal Aviation Administration to be the lead for the National Center of Excellence for Unmanned Aircraft Systems. Mississippi State University's ASSURE is a consortium of academic institutions, along with government and industry partners tasked with identifying and researching issues critical to the safe integration of UAS into the national airspace system and developing policy recommendations on the expanding use of unmanned aircraft. Although only 2 years old, ASSURE's UAS research is already influencing the FAA's thoughts regarding small UAS flight operation over people and property. Additionally, ASSURE is engaged in an aggressive research program to support beyond visual line of sight operations. Safety concerns regarding flights over populated areas and beyond visual line of sight must be resolved before safe and routine UAS delivery services are part of our daily lives. And a successful business case can be made after that for continued investment in this innovative idea. The ASSURE UAS air-to-ground collision study released in April is challenging previous perceptions regarding human injury in the event of a small UAS impact. This project will be continuing as a second phase starting in June, testing numerous types of UAS and increasing the human impact component of the research. I think it's crucial that we continue that. I'm pleased to have this hearing. Look forward to hearing what the witnesses have to say. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and I yield back the balance of my time, and the chair now recognizes for her opening statement the gentlelady from Illinois, the ranking member of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many consumers today like to have their purchases delivered directly to their homes. The rise in online shopping and mobile purchases has meant that more business for the post office, delivery workers, couriers, truckers, and anyone else involved in moving goods from the warehouse to the doorstep. Given the rise in home delivery, it's no surprise that companies are involved in this space. Today, we'll hear about a few of those innovations, specifically drones and delivery robots. I have no shortage of basic questions about the technologies. How does the delivery robot know when to cross the street? How worried should I be about these things running into me? One of my staffers saw this cooler-looking object with a flag on it next to him and startled him on the sidewalk. And researchers and firms will continue to work through technological challenges as they work to improve automation. Meanwhile, Congress needs to work through the policy changes that technologies like this represent. This is yet another hearing in our Disruptor series, and disruption can be good or bad, depending on how you like the current system and what it's being replaced with. In past hearings, we've weighed concerns about safety, privacy, and other protections. One topic that I don't think we hit on enough is the impact on our workforce. It's a simple reality. Disruptive technologies like automation will disrupt some American livelihoods. How would we adjust if in a few years we no longer need delivery workers? This is not a hypothetical question. Today there are many workers without college degrees who used to have good jobs with decent income but now struggle with long periods of unemployment and lower earning potential. The American economy as a whole might be growing, but Americans in certain sectors feel like they're falling further and further behind. How do we address this? Clearly, blocking the adoption of new technology cannot be a long-term strategy or solution. We need to look carefully at our education system. Are today's students acquiring skills that will be still useful as automation progresses? For Americans currently in the workforce, how do we assist workers when their existing skills fit fewer and fewer available jobs? We need a robust system of assistance and job training to ensure that Americans can maintain a decent standard of living. We must also ensure that protections keep up with new technology. Old safeguards don't go out the window when a new technology appears. Workers deserve dignity, whether they work in conventional delivery or work on automated delivery systems. That means fair wages, a safe workplace, and the right to collective bargaining. Consumers need assurances of privacy, safety, and fairness, whether they're buying a product in a store and ordering home delivery by a drone via via a mobile app. The technologies of adapting to the challenge of adapting to technological change is by no means unique to the delivery sector. But automation and delivery advances, I believe now is the time to wrestle with difficult policy questions. As the Subcommittee on Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection, our job is not to just marvel at cool new stuff, though it can be fun to see what's being developed. We must get beyond the novelty factor and determine the real policy issues at play and legislate accordingly. I look forward to hearing our witnesses' perspectives on development and consumer delivery. I hope that you can provide some insight as we determine how federal policy keeps up with the latest technology. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady yields back. The chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from Oregon, will not be making an opening statement. Is there anyone on our side that would like to claim this time? If not, the chair would then recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the ranking member, Ms. Schakowsky, as well for their continued commitment to this series and for encouraging this conversation. To the witnesses today, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I hope you'll bear with us as we attempt to catch up to the rapid pace with which you innovate. Thank you for being here. Technology is in its infancy and provides a rare opportunity for bipartisan agreement in supporting its growth and your companies. And with increased funding for our scientists and investments in STEM education, we can ensure that this critical R&D continues and ultimately consumers benefit in ways that we have yet to even imagine. That future is as bright as it is exciting. But greater AI, machine learning, and automation can bring with it significant dislocation in our labor markets and with that, job loss. As with it comes greater social responsibility to those who are left behind. That is part of the conversation that we need to be having in this subcommittee. As Congress defends our small businesses and traditional industries, we need to prepare for a future where drones may replace deliverymen, where computers replace cashiers, where even apps may replace doctors. And that's why we have to extend STEM education into every single school, regardless of zip code. Why we need to begin investing in workforce training programs for all ages today, not tomorrow. By balancing our proud history and our bright future, will require vigilance and engagement at all levels of government and the private sector. And I'd greatly appreciate hearing from our witnesses about how we prepare our working families for it, the role in which you view federal policy in helping to strike this balance and encouraging you to innovate and solve challenges that we have yet to even design or yet to imagine, while ensuring that we remain and retain a talented, dedicated, educated workforce that in fact is going to power that growth to begin with. And with that, I would reserve the balance of my time or yield it to the chairman, ranking member of the full committee if he is ready for it.
Thank you very much. Would the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, is recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I can put this all in the time allotted, but if not, I'll just ask you to include it in the record. This hearing will explore the new and innovative ways consumers will receive goods in the future, or in some cases right now. Today, two-day delivery of a package is commonplace, and now we're seeing on-demand delivery in under an hour. These deliveries are not just being carried out by people, but now also by robots, and in the future, drones. As I have stated at past hearings regarding new technologies, privacy, data security, and cybersecurity must be baked into the devices and the software. We only need to look to the front pages to see that cyber attacks such as Russian hacking have become an everyday occurrence. Creators and manufacturers of internet-connected technology must take responsibility for mitigating this problem. This committee has had more than 10 hearings as part of the Disruptor series. These hearings have given members a taste of the latest technologies that are changing how our economy works, and this exposure is important. However, I'm hoping at today's hearing we can begin to discuss how these disruptions affect the American worker. While no one is advocating for slowing down innovation, and in fact we're continually pushing for more innovation, we should not forget that these new disruptors can bring challenges. As policymakers, we should acknowledge that some of the ways industries mechanize and automate can also cause job loss or wage loss, so while the national economy benefits, individual workers may suffer. Disruption is nothing new. While the agricultural sector has become vastly more productive, it now is a smaller percentage of the overall workforce. And as this committee is well aware, the total number of manufacturing jobs has shrunk in part due to automation. The automation we're discussing today could, for example, have an impact on truck drivers and delivery services. Economists have studied long-haul truck driver jobs and believe these jobs are at risk as driving becomes more automated. And today, 1.7 million people are employed driving these routes. They are good wage jobs that will be displaced, and this hearing is mostly focused on short-distance delivery services, which employs over 1 million workers, so some of these jobs are surely at risk too. And finally, I don't want to be alarmist, and in fact, I believe we as a society can meet the challenge, but we need to be thinking about the potential job impacts now so we can prepare for the future. We need to revisit whether our education systems are preparing the next generation for the shifting workplace. We need to ensure that retraining programs are effective, and we need to invest more in research and development to ensure that the United States continues to lead the world in innovation. It's time we try to plan ahead instead of letting ourselves be caught off guard when it's too late. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and that will conclude the member opening statements. The chair would like to remind all members that pursuant to the committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. Again, I want to thank all of our witnesses for being with us today and taking time to testify before our subcommittee. Today's witnesses will have the opportunity to give opening statements, followed by a round of questions from our members. Our witness panel for today's hearing will include Mr. Bastian Lehman, founder and CEO of Postmates, Mr. Brian Wynn, president and CEO at Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. Dr. Harry Hoser is a John Lafarge Jr. S.J. Professor of Public Policy at the McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown University. And Mr. Sham Shadamber, Chief Evangelist and Senior Advisory at Flirty. We appreciate you all being here with us today, and we'll begin the panel discussion today with Mr. Lehman. And you will be recognized for 5 minutes to give your opening statement, and just pull that mic right up to you. And thanks for being here with us today.
Chairman Lata, Ranking Member Tchaikovsky, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee of Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection. Let me begin by stating that our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Manchester and the UK this morning. As a co-founder and CEO of Postmates, we recognize the power of global networks to overcome intolerance and power opportunity. So it is a pleasure to join you and my distinguished co-panelists this morning for a discussion on how cutting-edge technologies and innovation are transforming traditional logistics and delivery networks. While advances made by on-demand platforms has certainly disrupted traditional models of how products and goods move across the country, it is important to start our discussion with an overview of how the nation's leading on-demand logistics provider, Postmates, a company I co-founded just 6 years ago, is disrupting the rate and pace at which commerce is flowing in your own backyards and districts. When Postmates is described as a leader in on-demand delivery, we quite literally mean that. Through the tap of a button on your phone, the platform enables anyone to get anything from their neighborhoods delivered to their doorsteps in just a couple of minutes. Where some logistics companies try to build a warehouse outside a city and funnel goods into it, we believe in a simple philosophy. Our cities, our towns, our communities, they are our warehouses. They are home to unique talents and creative expertise that craft and curate high-quality products, food, and merchandise that power our economies. We aim to understand the inventory available in each given town, index each of its product offerings, and connect you directly to that experience by having a fleet of couriers, which we refer to as Postmates, deliver this inventory. We allow you to find and order from any restaurant or store in your city. That means, in addition to delivering prepared food, the platform is also empowering everyone from public school teachers ordering supplies to their classrooms to helping families of the elderly ensure groceries or medicines are delivered to their doorsteps. And with over 65,000 active Postmates across 45 major metropolitan markets covering 200 US cities, our platform facilitates more than 2 million deliveries per month. This year alone, we're on track to facilitate $1 billion worth of total goods sold on the Postmates platform. And since we started the platform, our Postmates have earned over $300 million in income. But this is just the beginning. The total sales of food and groceries last year in the United States alone was nearly $1.4 trillion. But less than 1.5% of that was sold online or through cell phones. That includes ourselves, our competitors, even big pizza delivery companies. With over 10,000 merchants throughout the country, from major brands like Chipotle, Apple, and Starbucks to local pharmacies and corner bakeries, Postmates is able to strike both local and national partnerships that continue to power sales throughout local economies. That's the power of Postmates and the on-demand economy. With each delivery, we generate critical sales for merchants in the towns each of you represent. But that story of economic empowerment is also told through the lens of flexibility we offer our fleet of Postmates, making each delivery. Currently, an independent contractor-based model provides on-demand platforms like Postmates and the couriers themselves optimal flexibility. By empowering our Postmates to control how and when they offer their service on our platform, we enable students to supplement their income between classes, aspiring entrepreneurs to save capital for new business opportunities, or parents to earn a little extra by completing deliveries after dropping their kids at school or soccer practice. All told, these sales and earnings are broadening the tax base, which are being reinvested right back into our communities. So we started asking ourselves a key question. Can we expand this base of earnings all while continue to rev the engines of economic impact in your districts? How can we do right by our couriers in helping them earn higher incomes? And how can we manage the on-demand logistics, in particular dense urban and suburban populations? One such way led us to experiment with what I like to refer to as sidewalk class robotics. As pointed out in a recent piece in the Harvard Business Review, executives have to cut through a lot of hype around automation. And I quote, "Leaders need a clear-eyed way to think about how these technologies will specifically affect their organizations. The right question isn't which jobs are going to be replaced, but rather what work will be refined and how." And this not need to be a terrifying exercise that evokes imaginary of Terminator or a world in where an entire labor force gets displaced. So we started looking at the trend lines to begin with a clear-eyed assessment of our landscape. We have people who use cars, bikes, scooters, motorcycles, or walk to complete a delivery, and each have a different strengths and suitability for different deliveries. But we also noticed that in particular dense or crowded clusters of downtown neighborhoods, the distance between popular delivery zones and popular restaurants or stores could often be quite short. While the Postmates platform is ready and equipped to make the deliveries, sometimes these short distance stretches aren't as financially advantageous to our couriers when compared to longer distance deliveries, and tips are often based on the distance traveled. One way to ensure the continuity of short distance deliveries while reserving our hardworking Postmates for longer distance deliveries has been through experimenting with robots. Through partnerships with robotic companies on both the East and West Coast, we have started to be able to measure how robots may be able to optimize delivery times when compared to current numbers. Most importantly, we can focus our fleet of Postmates to complete deliveries that are likely to connect them to incomes at a much higher rate. Our thesis is then that with both human hand and robotic operators on the ground, commerce can move at even higher rates, with more functional ways to make deliveries in each city. In the long term, this could ultimately help drive down the overall cost of delivery as the supply of couriers increases. We at Postmates do not see a world in which robotics will be the ultimately delivery mechanism. Instead, taking these incremental and responsible steps to test automation without shortchanging our human workforce provides us with 3 tangible gains.
Pardon me, Mr. Lehman, if you could just, we're running over right now on your time. If you want to just wrap up real quick, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. As I said, we don't believe that just robots will be doing deliveries in the future, but we also agree that if that happens, we have to be aware of a future in where we invest into STEM education, where we and Congress should and must work to advance a budget which prioritizes improving STEM teaching, expanding access to rigorous STEM courses, addresses bias for underrepresented students in STEM, and revitalizing apprenticeship programs in this country to skill up workers no matter their age.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Nguyen, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement. Thanks very much.
Chairman Latta, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing to discuss innovative delivery systems. I'm speaking on behalf of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, which represents unmanned systems in all domains. Today I'll be focusing my remarks on unmanned aircraft systems, or UAS. From inspecting pipelines to news gathering to mapping flood zones, UAS help us save time, save money, and most importantly, save lives. It's no wonder why thousands of businesses, small and large, have already embraced this technology, and many more are considering integrating it into their future operations, including for delivery. The FAA implemented the Small UAS Rule, also known as Part 107, last August. It was the result of years of collaboration between industry and government that established a flexible, risk-based approach to regulating UAS. These regulations have been in effect for more than 8 months, and there is strong evidence the commercial UAS market is poised for significant growth. As of this month, there are more than 820,000 UAS registrations with the FAA, the vast majority of which are hobbyists. Of those, 62,000 platforms have been registered for commercial use. The FAA expects more than 400,000 UAS could be flying for commercial purposes over the next 5 years, a more than 6-fold increase from today. An economic analysis by AUVSI projects that the expansion of UAS technology will create more than 100,000 jobs and generate more than $82 billion to the economy in the first decade following full integration into the national airspace. After witnessing the growth of the industry over the last few years, under the right conditions, we believe these numbers could go higher. Many of our members are exploring ways UAS can transport goods such as household items, medical supplies, food, maybe even people in the not-too-distant future. Companies such as Amazon, Google, and UPS are among the major players who hope to eventually launch UAS delivery services. Several companies are already testing the delivery capabilities of UAS both domestically and abroad, including at Mississippi State, sir. We are at the dawn of a new American renaissance in technology, one that deserves government attention and support. In the past, government invested heavily in physical infrastructure, from the nation's air traffic control system to the interstate highway system, which ultimately had a tremendous impact on commerce. The benefits, however, did not stop there. Over time, the safety, security, and efficiency gains we achieved as a nation have vastly outweighed those costs, and the unmanned systems industry will be no different. We need a new national imperative in unmanned systems that, like the air traffic control system and the interstate highway system before it, create greater capacity, reduce road congestion, fulfill consumer demands, and facilitate the future of commerce. Industry is bringing the technology. Government needs to do more to support it and advance innovations such as delivery services. A vital prerequisite for advancing UAS is an appropriately funded FAA that can meet the IT, employment, and staffing needs required for the future. The FAA needs, first and foremost, to automate its UAS procedures. Automation will also be important beyond Part 107 for more complex operations such as delivery services. Many of its important management tools and processes which facilitate safer and more seamless UAS operations currently operate by manual data input or processing. The FAA also needs more employees who are dedicated to future UAS rulemakings to move us beyond the current regulations. Industry is not relying on the FAA and government alone to advance UAS. It's currently shouldering many of the R&D costs to spur innovation, finding solutions to make UAS fly higher and further, more safely and efficiently. Industry has also been a close partner with government in advancing a UAS traffic management system, known as UTM, and in developing standards for remotely identifying operators and owners of UAS. The UAS industry is primed for incredible growth thanks to industry representatives and government regulators nurturing innovation that helps business be competitive in the marketplace. We hope that these efforts can be sustained and that we continue to reach new historic milestones in integrating this technology into the national airspace and pave the way for regular and widespread UAS deliveries. Thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to questions from the panel.
Well, thank you very much. And Dr. Holzer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Latta, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and committee members, thank you for inviting me today to share my thoughts on the new digital technologies and how they affect the labor market and the economy. I'll tell you up front that I know nothing about drones, so I defer completely to my other colleagues at the table, but I know a little bit about labor markets and technology, and that's mostly what I'll focus on. So I'd like to make 5 broad points today. Point number 1, employment in trucking, courier services, and warehousing has actually been growing quite rapidly recently, and relatively good jobs are being created, all of this because of growing e-commerce. 100,000 jobs were created just in the past year. In these sectors, I believe that trend will continue for years to come as e-commerce spreads. Since the loss of delivery jobs associated with drones or even autonomous vehicles remains at least somewhat speculative in terms of its timing and magnitudes, I don't expect the employment gains in these sectors to disappear anytime soon. Point number 2, broadly, disruptive technologies tend to raise our labor market productivity and therefore our living standards. Given how flat productivity growth has been in recent years in the overall economy, the development of technologies that enhance productivity should be welcomed. And I'll say very clearly, it is difficult, if not impossible, to have strong earnings growth over time for our workers if productivity growth remains so weak. Point number 3, periodically we have these panics in the US and elsewhere over mass displacements and unemployment associated with new technologies. Remember the Luddites in Britain in the 19th century, but maybe more relevant for us, there was a large automation scare in the US in the late 50s and early 60s because of fear that computers would take everyone's jobs. These fears are almost always overblown. New jobs are created when automation causes others to disappear, and workers with skills that complement the new technologies actually face a better labor market for their skills. And what are these complementary skills? Of course, technicians and engineers, but almost anyone with creative skills or social and communicative skills. Those workers all do better. Of course, some workers are substitutes for technology, not complements. They do worse. Therefore, point number 4, many millions of workers, and in the US, and especially less educated men, have been hurt by digital technologies in the past 4 decades in manufacturing and in other industries as well, either when they're directly displaced by these technologies or because the labor market overall has grown less hospitable to them. Those displaced by technologies often experience lengthy unemployment, and when they become reemployed, on average, they take jobs with wages 25% lower, and that's on average. But more broadly, the real earnings of men with only high school diplomas or less have stagnated or even fallen over the past 4 decades, again, depending on how you measure that. And they have fallen behind, in real terms, relatively every other major group in the labor force. And in response to these stagnating and declining wages, millions of prime-age men have left the workforce. And that's a terrible problem because their disappearance from the workforce hurts themselves, their families and communities, and the U.S. economy overall. Therefore, point number 5, a range of important policies should be adopted and strengthened to help workers, the ones hurt by the new technologies, help them make adjustments in this new labor market. We need policies to ensure that workers share in whatever productivity growth is generated by these new technologies over time. And I think of those technologies broadly as falling into 3 buckets. From my point of view, the most important is education and workforce development. In addition to STEM education, other kinds of education in the K through 12 years, critical thinking, communication skills, et cetera, but really helping more people get the post-secondary credentials that the labor market finds valuable. We need a lot more help there. Secondly, I think it's very important to maintain a robust system of unemployment insurance, but perhaps one with some reforms to encourage workers to build new skills and get jobs more rapidly and as soon as possible. I also believe it's important to talk more about wage insurance, where displaced workers, if they take new jobs at lower wages, have part of their wage loss compensated, and we can talk about that. And finally, the third bucket, we need to ensure that workers share in the productivity gains generated. That includes protections for the right to collectively bargain in the private and public sectors, as well as limits on anti-competitive practices by employers, such as the growth of non-compete clauses in their contracts with worker. And happy to discuss all of this further. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Schottenheimer, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement. Thank you very much for being here. Could you put, there we go.
My name is
There we
Shyam.
go.
All right. Let me begin again, if I don't mind. Thank you, Chairman Ladda, and thank you, members of the committee, to invite me to this hearing. My name is Shyam Chidambar. I'm a senior advisor and chief evangelist at Flirty, a leading drone delivery service company. In my allotted time, I'd like to do 2 things: give you a very brief history of our remarkable company and share with you our perspective on drone technology and where it's going. Flirty is a startup company that has its roots in Sydney, Australia. In 2013, we began testing textbook delivery at the University of Sydney. Our goal was for students to place their orders using a smartphone app and receive their books within minutes at their current GPS location anywhere on campus. We are now an American company headquartered in Reno, Nevada. We were chosen by Y Combinator, the famous Silicon Valley business incubator, have collaborated with NASA, the University of Reno, Virginia Tech, the Johns Hopkins Medical Center. We've been funded by venture capitalists like Menlo Park Ventures, Qualcomm Ventures, and several others. About a quarter of our workforce are US veterans, and we employ young graduates from engineering schools who want to change the world through innovation. Over the last 24 months, we have achieved several major milestones in US aviation history. Here are a few. 1, in July 2015, we made the first FAA-approved drone delivery on US soil. We delivered essential medicines to patients at a free medical clinic in southwestern Virginia in collaboration with NASA Langley, which our CEO, Matt Sweeney, referred to as our Kitty Hawk moment. In June 2016, we conducted the first ever ship-to-shore-to-ship transport of medical supplies, simulating the applicability of drones to emergency medical situations in the aftermath of a natural disaster. Appropriately enough, this was conducted in Cape May, New Jersey, a few miles from the bullseye of Hurricane Sandy. I have a short video to play. If we can play that, I think you'll appreciate the small example.
Because because they can go where there are no roads. Drones are unique because they can go where there are no roads.
Imagine in the event of a natural disaster like Hurricane Sandy.
The infrastructure, the roads are washed away. Drones are a way to get around that.
Today, Flirty is conducting the first ship-to-shore drone delivery in U.S. history. It's just one of the first of millions of drone deliveries that will take place all across the United States in years to come.
No one's tried it before. That's why this is groundbreaking.
Flirty built their technology for today. Practical, life-saving applications of the drones. Claims we hear about what drones can deliver, they are actually doing.
Flirty mission is to revolutionize last-mile consumer delivery and at the same time utilizing the same fundamental technologies to save lives as well.
It's a potential resource that we're not utilizing.
We're making drone delivery ubiquitous all around the world to save lives and change lifestyles.
Hopefully that gives you a little idea. In 2016, we made the first FAA-approved delivery to a suburban home in Reno, Nevada. Partnering with 7-Eleven, we delivered over-the-counter medicine, food, and drinks to Wonderstruck customers. Most of all, we are delighted that our historic drone delivery in Wise, Virginia, has been recognized with the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum with an exhibit that will be opening soon. We are a genuine American success story. Most people are no doubt familiar with the military applications of drone technology, but I'm here to suggest to you that drones are a game-changing commercial and civilian technology, one I believe can save lives and enhance lifestyles. Let me share 2 examples. Imagine an elderly woman who lives by herself, homebound during a snowstorm. She finds to her dismay that she just ran out of her insulin medication. The snowstorm has raged all night, her driveway is not clear, and the roads are impassable. She can pull out her cell phone and order her insulin refill from a pharmacy and have it delivered by a Flirty drone that takes off from the pharmacy, flies using GPS, and hovers close to her front stoop and delivers a packet of life-saving insulin. As Doc says in Back to the Future, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. Think of the handyman who fixes roofs for a living. Instead of climbing a rickety ladder placed against a mossy gutter, he pilots a drone over your roof, takes vivid HD pictures that you can both see on an iPad. It's quick, easy, efficient, safe, and more reliable. You have first-hand proof of the damage of your roof. The handyman has to carry less hazard insurance. He can inspect more roofs and earn more money.
Pardon me, if you could also wrap up, we're over about a minute on
Sure.
time there. Thank you.
This future has been made possible by simultaneous advances in multiple technologies: GPS, batteries, avionics, materials, smartphones, 3D printing, just to name a few. The age of fast, efficient, safe, low-cost, last-mile delivery using drones is at hand. There are some technical challenges in drone design, battery capacity, and safety systems that remain, but these are being addressed. It's only a question of time before we solve them. So we at Flirty ask you to imagine a future where in the event of a natural disaster like Hurricane Katrina, drones deliver urgent medical supplies, food, and water to those in need. Imagine a future where you can order anything you like online and have it reliably delivered to you within a few minutes, if not a few hours. Imagine a future where you can order food and have it delivered directly to your location within minutes. That future is at hand. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and again, thank you to all of our witnesses for your testimony today. This will now proceed into the question and answer portion of the hearing. I will begin the questions by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. And Mr. Nguyen, in your testimony, you touched on how commercial drones offers societal and economic benefits. Would you please explain the benefits and how commercial drone use provides them?
Well, we're starting today under Part 107 regulations with largely vertical infrastructure inspections. That's because under the rules, we have to keep drones within visual line of sight. That's offering tremendous safety benefits right away in industries such as cell towers, the cellular industries, cell tower inspections, and wind tower inspections and so forth. People used to climb, up on these towers. Now they don't have to. They can execute their jobs with this technology standing on the ground. Lots of different public safety applications for this. Search and rescue is very large among them, et cetera. As we get permission to fly, having demonstrated the safety of the technology in use in the National Airspace System, as we have the ability to fly more complex operations, we'll be able to do more things and create even greater value. That's a progressive process. I think we've picked probably the most challenging and most complex operation of all, delivery of something in a congested airspace in an urban area, for example, but we'll get there.
Let me ask you, if I follow up, because when you're talking about the visual line of sight, how far are you talking then that you're in that visual line of sight, the distance?
Well, with my eyes or yours, sir, it depends
It could be
on the size of the drone.
or binoculars.
I'm wearing my glasses. That's it. We have to keep the drones under 400 feet or
Okay.
400 feet vertical of whatever it is we're inspecting, either laterally or above the structure. So we'll call it under 400 feet.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Mr. Lehman, if I could turn to you, could you explain how your platform, Postmates, uses it's to complete deliveries? And one of the things that, or some of the questions, the technology we talked about a little bit earlier about being able to cross the street when it gets to its delivery point. If you could kind of go into that, explain how that all works and functions.
Yeah. There we go. Sorry for that. Of course, first of all, our humans probably do it just like we all do. So they watch the traffic lights, and maybe it's surprising to hear, but the sidewalk class robots do it in a very similar way. They're equipped with sensors, ultrasonic sensors, LiDAR sensors. They can be connected to the smart grid of a city, but by the sensors alone, they're able to read traffic lights. They see humans walking on the street. They see other objects, and they behave accordingly. They travel at roughly 4 miles an hour.
And how many do you have out right now that you're testing?
There's a few dozen that we're testing with on the East Coast and on the West Coast, slightly more on the West Coast. We're partnering in total with 4 companies, and we're working on our own solution in-house as well.
Thank you. Mr. Shadamer, if I could turn to you, in your testimony you mentioned about Flority's FFA-approved delivery of medicine to a clinic in Virginia. Would you explain again how the medicine delivery for your FAA-approved drone was made? Again, was that line of sight, or how did you get that to to that delivery?
We did do the line of sight kind of delivery at Wise, Virginia. It was under controlled conditions, obviously. There was complete line of sight during the time of travel. The Fluty drone took off from Lonesome Pine Airport, which is a small county airport, and the medical camp was in a fairgrounds, which is about 1.5 miles away. So there's a clear line of sight standing on top of the roof to see the entire flight as it progressed. So there was somebody watching the drone the entire time.
And so as you say, it was you say about 1.5 miles?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, how high did the drone go then?
It's about 300 to 400 feet.
300 to 400 feet?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I will yield back the balance of my time, and we'll recognize the gentleman from Illinois, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. As we've heard from our witnesses today, automated delivery has the potential to create new jobs for some people. For example, it's likely there will be more jobs for people who work in engineering and customer service, and new business opportunities could be created if delivery services become cheaper and faster and more widely accessible. But with automation, as with other shifts in the job market, there are winners and losers. So Dr. Holzer, you wrote in your testimony, and you said it today, that millions of workers have already been hurt by technological change in the past 4 decades. I wondered if you could expand on that a little bit.
In the last 4 decades, we've had two very powerful forces affecting the U.S. labor market, technology as well as globalization. On average, the technology has done more to substitute for less educated workers, especially in old-fashioned production jobs on assembly lines, as well as clerical workers in offices. And since that's a fairly routine kind of work, historically done by less educated workers, the machines could do that more efficiently in globalization as well. But this has been a good period for people that have post-secondary education. As I said before, anyone with communication skills, problem-solving skills, et cetera, comes out better in this process. I think the other thing to remember is that, as you suggested, all of these technologies lower costs, therefore lower prices to consumers. They have more money to spend. They spend more sometimes in those sectors and elsewhere, and new jobs get created that way as well. But there's no guarantee that everybody's wages will go up instead of down. It's usually a mix.
Let me ask you a real-world question. Will workers who have gone to community college or universities be affected differently than those who have not? Are we going to have to expand educational opportunities?
No one knows for sure, but our best guess is that it will, because artificial intelligence will enable these machines to do more and more, not just the routine work on assembly lines, but work that professionals have done, everything from finance and accounting to law and medicine. So it will likely expand up the ladder. We will therefore need, what happens is that we'll need to invest more in training people in those complementary skills that the machines don't do. And so in all of these sectors, there will have to be adjustments made, and students will have to invest in different kinds of education than they did in the past.
Let me ask you about geography a little bit. Some experts have pointed out that the benefits of technological change accrue disproportionately on our country's coasts. Meanwhile, jobs in rural areas and middle America are being lost to automation. I'm wondering if you've done any research on that.
I have. I would put it slightly differently. I think that workers in large metropolitan areas, even those internally like Chicago and Cincinnati, have done very well. When they've lost manufacturing jobs or similar, they've often gained in health jobs, education jobs, et cetera. I think it's more in the smaller metro areas and smaller towns, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Dayton, Ohio, places like that, that you haven't seen the new jobs replace the ones that have been lost. So there, I think we have two choices. Number one, we can help workers relocate from those locations to where the jobs are, but not everybody's going to relocate. And number two, there are things we can probably do to help generate more economic activity in those locations. And I think we should be thinking about some of both kinds of strategies.
Well, that's really wanted to go. How can we help assure that new opportunities are created by automation and that they're accessible to all workers across the country?
So as I indicated in my comments, I see three broad strategies here, essentially education, unemployment insurance, wage insurance, and also making sure the workers share. When you're talking about these smaller towns and rural areas internally, jobs aren't there at all. But even here, e-commerce, for instance, has the potential to bring more jobs to those areas, right? People can do coding and other kinds of e-commerce work, even where the physical products and locations aren't there, or warehouses and trucking. If these products are going to be delivered to these smaller towns and rural areas, at least in the short term, before the drones and the autonomous vehicles, there can be some new job creation there as well. So I think we need to think creatively about what kinds of jobs can be encouraged in some of these locations, and at what kinds of wages, again, while we help people have the mobility, some of them, to move to where the job growth is.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, the vice chairman of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to each of you being here today on this very important and interesting topic. And Mr. Wynn, it's good to have you back. Last time that you testified during the subcommittee's hearing on the evolving use of drones, we talked about the UAS Center of Excellence's research and FAA's roadmap for integrating UAS in the National Airspace System. Following up on that discussion, what areas of research do you believe that the Assure program should be focusing on to more rapidly implement routine UAS package delivery system?
The Assure program is very broad in its scope, doing a lot of different work that's really important to get to more complex operations. I think that one of the biggest challenges we need to solve is detect and avoid technologies. Pilots today, myself included, we use, if we're not, in the clouds, we're literally, it is our responsibility to see and avoid other aircraft. That's harder to do when you're not on the aircraft. So we're developing technologies for see and avoid, well clear standards, et cetera, et cetera. All of that work is being led by the Center of Excellence. It's being distributed through some of the best minds in the country and a lot of collaboration going on. So I would choose that as probably one of the seminal technologies that is being developed today.
Okay. And obviously, those that are flying private aircraft, commercial, they've got to know that something's in that space. And then I guess the drones themselves need to be able to realize that they're both in the same zone. Is that what you're referring to?
That's exactly right. So there's I mean, we're talking about smalls today, under 55 pounds, small UAS. Ultimately, there'll be aircraft of all sizes, and there are aircraft of all sizes already that fly in all areas of the airspace. So, there are different kinds of rules above 18,000 feet Class A airspace than we would need below 400 feet where there's very little traffic. But the drones themselves need to be able to automatically adjust to one another, and they need to be able to adjust to anything not performing in the system or not participating in the system, such as an EMS helicopter. Sure. Or potentially an air applicator for agricultural purposes.
We certainly know that the drone delivery business idea is not just limited to the United States. And we've been advised that the Assure program has been contacted by other countries asking for information on its research. How important is regulatory cross-border harmonization to the drone delivery business?
It's very important. The UTM system, unmanned aircraft system, traffic management that ultimately we're developing, and I think the United States is, through NASA and the FAA, has been leading on. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Authority or organization in Montreal, recently launched an initiative with NASA. They recognize, many member states at ICAO recognize that they don't want to do this all themselves. So I think U.S. leadership is going to be critical in getting this done. But clearly, there'll be contributions from all over the world. This is a global phenomenon, this technology. But I think we're now in a place where we can lead.
Mr. Chidamber, do you see differences between how the United States treats commercial drone delivery and how drone deliveries are treated in other countries? And with that, is the U.S. Ahead or behind other countries in the drone marketplace?
On the regulation side, I think the FAA has been slower than their equivalent authorities in other parts of the world. I'm thinking particularly of New Zealand, where we actually delivered Domino's Pizza in New Zealand, in Auckland actually. The approvals came faster. It was based on risk assessment, not just the aircraft, but who's running the aircraft, what controls are there, and so on. So a risk-based analysis of approvals is probably what we require. And I think the FAA is heading in that direction. We'd like to see them go faster towards that goal, and I think we'll get there.
And you think the risk assessment is key to this?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. I think the threat from perhaps a hobbyist is greater than a legitimate operator who's running a business and making deliveries for medicine or pizza or whatever it might be. That person's going to be carrying insurance, carrying, it's their brand. They got to protect all that. So a legitimate business, which is operating under the confines of the rules of the land, are going to be quite cognizant of all of these things. And safety is a big issue for them.
Thank you very much. My time's expired. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know I was coming up that quick. I want to thank both Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Chakowski for having this hearing today. Ensuring the safety of our constituents has and will continue to be our top priority. Although automation technology has potential for massive benefits to society, including the disabled and elderly, like all groundbreaking technology, there are risks to some parts of society that need to be considered. I look forward to talking about this with our experts. Automated delivery of goods has been talked about as a way to help mitigate the last mile problem, the inefficiency of a carrier trucks delivering goods short distances and individual consumers. However, in cities like I represent in Houston, part of which I represent, distance frequently can be quite long. My first question I'd like to ask the panel, do you see this affecting the use of automated delivery technology, and if so, how? Any response? Nope.
I can take it. Okay. From Postmates' perspective, we believe that the short-range deliveries are what we can conquer first, we can experiment first with our delivery robots that are predominantly designed for sidewalks.
Okay. Dr. Howes, in your testimony, you talk about how disruptive technology has the potential to affect the labor market, especially the trucking, delivery, courier industry. I'd like to ask the whole panel their thoughts about what industries would be disrupted by this technology and where they see new labor trends developing as a result. And let me just say, in the Houston area, I've watched in the last 4 years Amazon come in and build a huge warehouse near our Intercontinental Airport because they're a transport, but they still have to get those packages out. And how would that disrupt these labor trends? It seemed like it just expanded unless they sent out those drones from their warehouse, using Amazon as an example.
I think there is, if I may, I think there are two trends that are important to distinguish here. On the one side, you have clearly a company like Amazon that gets more sophisticated with their delivery infrastructure, and they want to optimize for a hub-and-spoke model that works very well for them. Centralized warehouses, fast delivery from these warehouses into metropolitan areas. But I believe it's important to recognize, and I would like the panel to recognize, that there are companies out there that specifically work on providing local retailers with technologies to compete with these sorts of infrastructure. Postmates, for example, allows local retailers to offer Amazon-like services and deliveries right from their retail stores. So we're envisioning a world that is a lot more decentralized, where you have a thriving local community. It is a different approach than that of Amazon, but we believe in thriving local economies, and we believe in a healthy local economy in communities.
May I add to that?
Yes.
I completely agree with that statement, because a small pizzeria with a drone delivery capability can compete more effectively with the large chains. So there's a whole competitiveness issue here that new technology brings to small players in the market. The second point I want to make is about productivity, which I think the good professor on my right-hand side said that earlier. Drones particularly can increase blue-collar productivity. And a roofer, a delivery person can make more deliveries per day doing those sorts of things. Their pay will go up. It's the productivity problem that these things will address, and that's the important thing to remember.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the distinguished panel. Mr. Lehman, you state in your testimony, with more than 65,000 active Postmates across 44 metropolitan markets covering 300 U.S. cities, our platform facilitates more than 2 million deliveries per month. Does that mean you are currently in major cities, or are you in rural areas as well?
Both. We're in major metropolitan areas, so we would consider Los Angeles a major metropolitan area, and then we have suburbs that we cover as well. We're in the OC.
Are you located throughout New Jersey, the state I represent in Congress?
We are, yes.
Thank you. Flaherty, I'm interested in your testimony I was very interested to hear that you conducted the first ever shore-to-ship-to-shore transport in New Jersey, and I appreciate your highlighting the significance of the location considering what occurred in 2012 regarding Superstorm Sandy, a devastating event for the region of the country, part of which I represent. Many lost electricity for between 1 and 2 weeks. Many of the roads were impassable with fallen trees, power lines, and debris. Had this technology been available then, how do you think it would have helped to mitigate the prolonged hardships many in New Jersey and in New York and Connecticut faced?
Thank you for that question. I think it would have been invaluable if we had drones by the shore, which could, the roads were impassable, as you remember, to get to the spot. But there were first responders who were already there. And if there were people who required medical assistance and they required medication of some sort, it would be tough for them to get that medication busted or trucked in from somewhere. Similarly, even simple things like potassium permanganate to just keep the water clean or anything like that, those things could have been brought from a boat alongside the waterway, and a drone could have shipped it over. So a number of things like that would have been possible. So absolutely, I think drones would have been very, very helpful if we had it deployed at Hurricane Sandy.
Thank
and
you.
I'm so sorry that we were not be able to do it.
Thank you. Let's hope that this type of natural disaster does not occur again, but obviously natural disasters will occur, and we're always interested in advanced technology. Mr. Lehman, in your testimony you mentioned sidewalk class robotics. Can you please explain to me at least what you mean by that?
It literally is I would say, everything under the size of a refrigerator robot that is driving itself on the sidewalks and streets of a city.
Thank you. This is a fascinating topic, and I'm sure that as we progress, the work of the distinguished members of the panel will lead to greater protection and greater service for the American people. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the panel. I want to ask your thoughts about privacy concerns. I mean, with all these drones flying around, they have a mission to do, maybe deliver a package. But they're also capable, obviously, of collecting data. They're also capable of taking photographs. They're also capable of doing things that some people may regard as an invasion of their personal privacy. Mr. Nguyen, is that at all a concern in your organization?
No, of course, sir. Everyone's in favor of privacy. The organization that I represent worked very, very hard in the NTIA process with civil liberties groups under the initiative from President Obama to discuss privacy, to come up with guidelines. Those guidelines are in effect for the industry. I would say that in terms of delivery, the amount of data that is required just to conduct that operation is probably already stretching or I would say creating opportunities for large chip manufacturers to try and figure out how to process that data. And so collecting additional data that's not related to the mission is probably less of a concern, but all of the companies involved are sensitive to the fact that they need to be focused on whatever it is that they're doing. And
so tell me, what do you think should be the heart of guidelines to protect privacy? And this would be from companies that are utilizing drones to be more productive, and but also private individuals using drones.
Well, I think it pertains to the way we collect data in general, and I use, in that process there were many ubiquitous technologies that we were already looking at, such as facial readers, license plate readers, facial recognition technology, et cetera, where the question is, what are you doing with that data? How is that data stored for what length of time, et cetera, et cetera? How is it protected? So all of those questions pertain. As it relates to individual use of drones, clearly that's, I think we are focusing on trying to educate people about safe and responsible flight. Responsible flight means you're not annoying people, you're not doing things that are already against the law, or utilizing this technology to break the law that pertain to the use of any other data collection.
Okay, Mr. Lehman, how about you? Do you see privacy as a legitimate concern among the public as to needing some regulation and guidelines that are required of folks using drones for otherwise legitimate purposes?
Thank you for the question, Representative Walsh. We do not use drones currently, but on the platform, on the Postmates platform itself, we obviously take data privacy very seriously. I can give you an example. The entire communication between you and the Postmate who would do the delivery on his behalf is anonymous. The data, even the phone numbers and the addresses of the addressee, for example, are disguised so that no party can see the other party's private information.
Okay, Dr. Holzer? Mr. Holzer? Well, your thoughts on privacy. That's a concern that a lot of people contact, I think, a lot of us about. People like the opportunities that drones can provide, but it also can be an invasion of privacy if done improperly.
In all honesty, I haven't thought a lot about privacy implications, so I'll pass on that and defer to my colleagues here.
Okay.
Privacy is a legitimate concern. Most people don't want their privacy invaded. Drones, and particularly companies like ours, which have drone delivery services, recognize that completely. And we guard the information. We keep it only for the purposes of flight planning and those sorts of things, and it's completely encrypted. It's just another set of files on a computer which are protected by encryption algorithms and the usual things that go with it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the witnesses for being here. I just want to, there's a recently joined with Congressman Aguilar to form a Congressional E-Commerce Committee, or caucus, and our districts are centers for e-commerce with UPS, Worldport next to my district. A lot of people in my district are involved in e-commerce. Amazon is a big player in Kentucky as well, among others. So there's lots going on. It's exciting times. And I would just, Mr. Wynn, we talk about package delivery with unmanned vehicle systems. What areas of the country or where particularly are these being really tested, or do you see them working? And there are actually some of them in progress right now and working. What kind of areas, where do you see most of the commercial testing being done, and why do you think that is?
Well, of course, there are the test centers that are around the country. I believe there are 6 test centers where some of that is being done. There's a lot of beyond visual line of sight being done in some of the test centers because they're specifically set up to not only conduct those missions, but also to collect the data that we need in order to demonstrate that this can be done safely and effectively. I think where the initial deliveries will probably occur will be in less risky airspace, less congested airspace. There are some delivery companies already that are doing last mile types of operations out in rural areas that save a little bit of wear and tear on their trucks. So it's not just from a warehouse to a delivery site. It might be from a truck to a delivery site as well. And again, in those instances, we might be out in very uncongested airspace where, again, we're able to learn in that environment and then ultimately bring the data that we have collected to the FAA and demonstrate this can be done in more complex airspace.
That's interesting because you do think of it being urban or suburban, but you could take it to parts of my district that have a town or a city and deliver out from there to the. You're right. There are a lot of miles traveled to get to certain areas of my district that are less popular. I appreciate that. So, Mr. Lehman, when we think about delivery service, we think of food or product, or we talked about pharmaceuticals. You indicate in your testimony that your platform offers much more than that. Can you explain how your platform has helped everyone from teachers to the elderly?
Thank you. It does that on both sides of the platform. I'll give you an example. We're delivering each month from roughly 60,000 local merchants throughout the United States. Around 70% of the platform is prepared food, but you find 30% of the 2 million deliveries across a wide range of retail categories, supermarkets, hardware stores, electronics. So customers really use the Postmates app for a wide range of access to goods. On the other hand, you have a very vibrant fleet of Postmates. Everyone from an artist, you can be a Postmates in a couple of minutes. If you head to postmates.com/fleet, you can sign up. As long as you pass the background check, you're good to go. And that's how we enable additional income in this country.
Well, thank you very much. And Dr. Holzer, my other role in Congress, I'm the chair of the Subcommittee on Higher Ed and Workforce. And it's so interesting in some of the things you're talking about. What you've seen over time is that automation has replaced routine work. But now when I visit companies as we move forth, they're using automation because they can't find work. So self-ordering at a restaurant, you just see it all the time. A lot of trucking companies are interested in unmanned vehicles because they can't find truck drivers. And in areas that, maybe in restaurants it's lower income, but I know one area where I am starts in the mid 40s, and it's not like you have to go to 2 years to get a degree. It's a 4 or 5 week truck driving school. So you said the policies need to be adopted. Training's there, and that's what we focus on. What kind of things we need to get the market working where we have jobs that actually pay pretty well, but we can't get people to get the retraining to get into the workforce?
Well, one of the
That's a big question, I know, in 48 seconds.
Okay. I think we need to make our higher ed institutions, and here community colleges are very important, make them more responsive to the labor market. I mean, as you know, right now, many community colleges, the public institutions, if they get the same subsidy from the state no matter what, they don't really have to worry about the labor market very much. A lot of states are moving towards making that money more conditional on outcomes. I'd like to make them more conditional on employment outcomes of the students there, along with some extra resources to make sure that these institutions, for instance, can cover the equipment costs, which are very high, and all the support services you need, like the career counseling, labor market information, to sort of reduce the gap between those institutions and the jobs. Of course, the other important strategy here is work-based learning, like apprenticeship. And I think we could do a lot more to encourage, to help and assist and financially incentivize more employers to create apprenticeships and other modes of work-based learning for workers. But this way you're bringing the labor market and the education closer together.
Okay, thank you. My time's expired. I'd love to go further, but my time's expired.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for not taking some of my time away since Mr. Guthrie went over on his time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Mr. Nguyen. In your prepared statement, you cite an economic analysis by AUVSI that projects that the expansion of UAS technology will create more than 100,000 jobs. It's good to hear, and generate more than $82 billion to the economy. Again, good news. Could you describe some of the types of jobs that might be created?
Well, let's start with the remote pilots. We've certificated 40,000 of those since August of last year. That's probably double the number of man pilots that we've certificated under Part 61. So we've got a lot of people coming into the workforce. Some of them are 4,000-hour pilots from the military. Some of them are people that are straight out of community college that are getting their training through community colleges. So they're out there now flying under Part 107. That's very, very good news. The design elements of the solutions that are coming to market through the air side alone, although we represent all things unmanned, are just many of the different technologies that my colleague from Fluherty mentioned are converging here in a very, very explosive way, very positively explosive way. So there's engineering, of course, but there's an entire market that developed in the cell phone arena that's worth $4 billion now for cell phone repair. Imagine that, with millions of drones, what kind of a market we're going to create for drone repair, for example, for more expensive platforms. So there are many different jobs out there that will essentially enable this technology solution going forward.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. And when it comes to the pilots, how long is the training roughly? I mean, what kind of training required for them to be licensed to do this job?
The only requirement for flying under 7A is a knowledge-based test that's administered by the FAA. As a Part 61 pilot, an existing pilot, there's a slightly different route that also involves demonstrating a certain amount of knowledge. What's happening in the marketplace is that groups that are standing up their own training programs to give pilots stick and rudder experience. Some of that is being done in our test centers, for example. Some of our organizations that want to fly over people recognize that there's additional risk associated with that. It can be done under waiver in Part 107, under a waiver, but they need to bring people to the table who know what to do in certain circumstances where there's additional risk and how to mitigate that risk. So those training programs are actually being developed based on the operations that are required. And in some instances, I'll take a utility company. That utility company might want to see additional training before they're going to let someone fly near and do inspections of one of their substations, for example. So we're in the process in AUVSI of getting those remote pilots together and looking at how do we develop that process of training pilots.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Well, this next question goes to all of you, whoever would like to answer it. Many national infrastructure and transportation technology achievements have been made possible in the past by government investment. For example, Congress's $25 billion authorization to construct the interstate highway system. What's the role of government investment in the advancement of automated technology? Any kind of partnership going on, or university grants? I mean, can we take credit for something? Just kidding.
I'll only talk about the employment side.
Okay.
And all of the jobs that you mentioned will require some new training. And the jobs created actually are much broader. And Mr. Wynn talked about the jobs directly associated with this technology. But as prices and costs come down, the entire retail sector could expand. And as I said, consumers will have more income to spend, so they can spend that economy-wide. So the whole range of jobs will require skilled workers and public investments. We got to make sure those public investments are efficient and done well. But there is already a large public role in higher education and workforce development, and I think it's very important that that role continue as we make those services more effective as well.
And I'll specifically say UTM is extremely important. The unmanned aircraft system, traffic management system, that's going to require it's going to require R&D. That R&D is largely being done. It was initiated inside of NASA. It's now being done in conjunction with the FAA and in collaboration with industry. So, but that requires some investment on the part of the government, and it's much like when we established the air traffic control system in the mid-30s and late 30s. It is going to require some leaning in by the government.
If I may, I can add two examples. Flirty was given space in the engineering lab at the University of Reno when we couldn't afford rent. And that was possible because the people in the university and the people in the government made that possible. And now we recruit people from a graduate program and an undergraduate program in drone engineering from that very school. So we've repaid it many times over already. A similar situation in Virginia Tech. Without Virginia Tech, we could not have done the first drone delivery in Wise County in Virginia 2 years ago. And that's because Virginia Tech supported us, helped us with testing. It was part of the UAV test facilities that had been set up by the FAA. And because of all of that, we were able to do what we did and grown from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again for another very interesting panel and discussion. You're never short of vision on where you want to take this. I'm intrigued with it because I get, Mr. Lehman, you're first. I can remember 60 years ago, we used to have couriers deliver groceries in our small community. So it's not something new. It's just you're apparently doing it in a more proficient way. It didn't last very long, but it was an interesting concept to have groceries delivered 60 years ago. But I want to focus more on the consumer protection part of this. I'm curious from the panel, what regulations or rules are out there now to control what can be delivered using a drone or a courier, for that matter? Can they? Because I'm interested in liability with it, and also for consumer protection, because if we've got a drug problem in this country that's pretty severe. Not pretty severe, it is severe. And are you able, under your rules and regs, are you able to deliver products from one household to another using a courier or using a drone? Is there a rule on that?
On the Postmates platform currently, that is not possible. The use of the couriers is tied to a purchase in a retail store that we enable on our platform. But just as a broader question, I believe that there are many better ways to disguise the delivery of drugs, for example, than to do it on platforms that use a lot of technology where it's difficult to disguise the identities of everyone involved.
But if this is the advent of what we're going to see more of, do we have a role here for government on consumer protection to develop some standards or things that you cannot, whether it's drugs, shipping across state lines that maybe would be inappropriate, weapons that could be shipped from, it could be a retail store to a home and not being under control? Is that possible now, that could happen? That you could ship a weapon?
Not on the Postmates platform. Our terms and services wouldn't allow that. But we operate under the federal and the state laws of each of the states, municipals, and communities that we're operating in. So,
are there any standards by which you ship, or is that just something you all have set? Are there standards set by the government about what can be shipped by courier or by drone? Are there any standards out there?
I do not believe there are any special. I don't think there are any special new guidelines that have been issued by the government about that. I think the rules that apply to all couriers, all other transportation mechanisms like FedEx or UPS, all those things still apply.
Let me find out more about that, because I am curious about it. I think the concept is very interesting. It's been around for a long time, but I'm with the advent of some of the other activities that have been going on, the bad actors out there, I'm just concerned about it. What about now from also a standpoint of intrusion with drones into a community, maybe per acre, perhaps, is having access to 5 drones in an acre, that's acceptable? Is that something, or is it 20 drones per acre that come in? Where does it stop? And where do we intrude on people's privacy of sound? Because these things aren't necessarily quiet. So if we reach that point that we have this proliferation, are we starting to have a problem for people in their privacy in their residential area?
Would you like to
what's
take that first?
What's the appropriate level of drone activity in a community? Is it 10 per acre, 1 per acre?
I think you're raising a very interesting question, sir. I don't have an answer to that question because we're nowhere near that level of adoption, and I think it's appropriate that we think about that. I will tell you this, that you know, as the driver of an electric vehicle that makes zero noise, which I thought was good for my neighborhood, there are people in the neighborhood who are concerned about me running over their children because they won't hear it coming. I haven't done that yet. I'm not aware of that ever happening with an electric vehicle. And I can tell you that you know, the noise that a drone makes is largely a function of what the quality of its propellers. So, I look at this from the standpoint of, you know, I represent an industry that is dedicated to getting this technology into the mainstream and creating value for society as well as economic business, economic opportunity for that society. So I think, you know, that can't be done without it being done sustainably. We have to consider the kinds of questions that you're raising, and I think it's very appropriate that we do.
Well, thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Mr. Chidamar, in your testimony, you mentioned the two-pronged mission of the FAA to promote safety in air commerce and also to foster air commerce in the United States. And so do you believe the FAA is fulfilling its full mission?
I believe the FAA is doing remarkably well in its safety mission, for sure. We have the safest, most crowded airspace in the world. No question about that. Thanks to the FAA, they are making sure that it's the safest place in the planet to fly aircraft. On the part of air commerce, I think that has not been of equal emphasis at this point. Certainly with respect to unmanned aerial vehicles, they're making clear steps in that direction.
What do they need to be doing, in your opinion?
There are three basic areas where we would like to see speedier approvals for trials and for eventual dissemination of this sort of technology. We need to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight. We need to be able to fly over people. And we need to be able to have one operator control multiple drones. Right now, those three things are not on the cards yet. So gradually, we have to get there in terms of allowing for experimentation, proving, data gathering, and then eventual, release of those things as a standard operating procedure. So those things need to happen.
Okay. You also mentioned in your testimony that in June of 2016, Florida highlighted other benefits of this commercial delivery system with the delivery of medical supplies. Can you discuss the extent of the demonstration, like how many deliveries in how many hours, the maximum weight they can handle, et cetera? If you can elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it very much.
Sure.
Very interesting, yes.
This is you're referring to the one in Cape May, New Jersey, I take it?
Yes.
What was happening was there was a boat on the shore, off on the water, and from there a drone took off and landed on land. There was a doctor who was collecting samples, biological samples. So the weight of it was not that much. We can carry up to about 7 or 8 pounds in terms of payload. So it was well underneath that. So the drone then takes off, goes back to the boat, where presumably it was a simulation, mind you. So presumably on the other side, tests can be performed. Let's say, is somebody affected with malaria and things of that nature. And you could then ship back medication, which the doctor could then administer to the patient and people like that. That was the simulation that was done. There's a few things here that was significant. Dr. Amukle from Johns Hopkins, who conducted the medical practice of it, he's interested in looking at blood samples and what happens to blood samples if you ferry them by drone. Do they spoil? Do they change? Is it affected? And we've been doing tests on all of these sorts of things, and we're happy to report that a lot of medical samples can indeed be delivered using drone without any detriment to their medical condition.
Well, that's good news. What other ways and examples could this benefit the public when, say, natural disasters or terrorist attacks may happen? Give me some other examples how this would benefit the public.
Food, medicine, water, cell phones, any number of things of that sort. The heart-rending scenes that we saw from Katrina, when there were signs painted on top of roofs saying, I need medicine, I don't have it, and there's water everywhere, nobody can get to that person. That sort of stuff can be avoided. Whatever that person needs, if they're in contact with someone, a drone can bring it over to them exactly where they are, which is remarkable. I think we could have saved lives in Hurricane Katrina for sure if you had drones deployed there.
And you said they could carry up to 7 to 8 pounds?
Yes,
is that right?
and the payloads are increasing every day as the technology gets better.
Okay, so it's fascinating. Thank you very much. Well, let's see, I've got 22 seconds. Quickly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nguyen, can you please provide us with some example of what the companies are doing as far as testing with regard to the delivery, please?
I mentioned that some of the delivery companies are already doing deliveries from their trucks in rural areas, so that's already happening. There are places in Africa where medical supplies have been delivered. I don't remember if it was Fluherty or not. But,
No, it wasn't.
But a number of companies.
It was a competitor.
Are doing that. Oh, beg your pardon. I'm in the
Unnameless
position
competitor.
of being able to root for everyone to win.
It's always good to have competition. You bring the prices down.
Yeah, and I think those are, right now, those are the most obvious. Probably the one that captures my attention is that we have a Global Hawk, which is a fairly sizable platform that does hurricane early detection of hurricanes off the east coast of Africa. 32, 36-hour endurance that literally flies out of Wallops and for NOAA. So that's beyond visual line of sight, and that's the kind of work that can be done that quite literally the Jim Cantoris of the world are really excited about.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a great hearing. Appreciate it. I'll yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last session in Congress, I had the distinction of serving on the Transportation Committee, specifically the Aviation Subcommittee, and paid close attention to the FAA regulations, as well as what I would say is a bit of a hands-off approach to UAVs. And it's been very interesting to see just how rapidly this sector of the economy has embraced UAVs as a delivery system, and I think very clearly that's going to continue. It obviously raises questions related to jurisdiction and what kind of regulatory framework we need, how much more intense it might need to be, or how light it should remain. So my questions relate to the waivers granted by FAA for commercial use of unmanned systems. Mr. Wynn, I would ask you, related to the waiting line for waivers, do you think it's still too long? I mean, obviously, you'd like to get same-day approval, but share with me your experience there, as well as how we might be able to streamline authorizations, develop best practices, which I think is emerging, and ensure that the FAA's designated test sites are used effectively.
We recently launched the Remote Pilots Council to gather those pilots that are starting to fly under Part 107, have been for the last 8 months in 9 cities around the country. We met with folks. The FAA participated in all of those meetings, which was a sign of their collaborative attitude. And the biggest complaint, of course, and that's what pilots do when we get together and we complain about the FAA. The biggest complaint and discussion point was how long it takes to get a waiver. No one was surprised by that, and the FAA is, I think, making good efforts to try and reduce those times. And sir, you will recall that we had the same problem with 333 exemptions back when that was the only way to fly commercially. But what happened over time was the swim lanes, as it were, what was required in order to get a waiver, what was required to get a 333 exemption became clearer and clearer, and that process got almost batch processed after a while. As I indicated in my written testimony, we really need to automate this process. The FAA agrees we need to automate this process, and they're making best efforts to do that. The waiver process should be much faster than it is today, and as we go forward, I think it will be.
Do you want to compare that to other countries? And Mr. Chidambra, and anyone else, if you want to weigh in after Mr. Wynn sort of comparatively looks at how other countries address the issue?
Anecdotally, there are places where it's less restrictive, but I think generally speaking, that's not necessarily in urban areas or congested airspace. So I think we're doing fine under Part 107. I think if we've got the ability to get the ability to do more things under waivers, and ultimately we can fly over people, which is the next stage in the regulatory process, we're going to continue to lead in this country.
I agree, with Mr. Wynn completely. The FAA has made huge strides. When we did our first thing in 2015, we placed our requirements with the FAA. I think it was in February of 2015. It was only in June or July that we got the waiver. Now it's much faster. All of these things are faster. To address your question about how it is in other places, I think Australia and New Zealand are the two countries which have really been further ahead than everybody else in this matter. When we did our test with Domino's in Auckland, I think the waivers were got within 24 to 48 hours, which is a lot faster than what it is here. But so we should get faster as well.
Help me understand, Mr. Nguyen, major companies have begun testing the capabilities of unmanned systems to deliver products and packages. How big would the products be or packages be? Like, look ahead 10 years, 20 years. Where do you think, at some point in time, logically, it will sort of manifest itself to the maximum physical size? What do you think that looks like? What do you think the future holds?
I don't have a good way to answer that question because Uber Elevate just came out with a platform that you could get in and fly autonomously, and they're wanting to operationalize that in 5 years, which is, you know, taking this technology and supersizing it in some respects. But I think I back up from an economics point of view and say the vast majority, an astonishingly high percentage of packages delivered in this country are under 5 pounds. Congressman Price, when I was testifying before Appropriations Committee on Transportation last week, asked me to speak to congestion and capacity. We have enormous amounts of capacity below 400 feet, whereas we have very little capacity on the roads today.
Right.
And with e-commerce continuing to advance, there will be more and more trucks on the road delivering 5 pounds or less packages, which I think we could deliver when the airspace is empty at night for noise abatement reasons. So I think that it balances us out at some point, but I think there's an enormous opportunity just up to 5 pounds.
Thank you. I yield back.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and seeing that there are no other witnesses or members asking questions to our panel today, I want to thank you again for being with us today. We, again, very, very insightful. And pursuant to committee rules, I remind all members that they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record. And I ask that witnesses submit their response within 10 business days upon receipt of those questions. And without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.